For you. was trying to think where Larry is.
Oh, he just moved. He's no longer in Sisters. So I think he's into Ben. Yeah. So, all right. Figure we're gonna get started now.
Okay.
The guys in the back did ask for you guys to adjust it and get close to the mic. So that's what they asked for.
All right.
We ready?
Yeah, why not?
All right. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Hello, my name is Sarah Adcock, and I am the Associate Curator here at the C.M. Russell Museum. And I just want to welcome everyone here. We are delighted to have you here for Clarke After Dark, a special evening dedicated to celebrating the life, artistry, and enduring legacy of John Louis Clarke. Before we begin, we'd like to extend our sincere gratitude to those who made the speechless exhibition possible. Our heartfelt thanks go out to our generous lenders who shared their treasure works of art, helping us bring together this remarkable collection and tell the story, or tell Clarke's story in such a beautiful depth and way. We also wish to recognize John Clarke's granddaughter, Dana Turvey, whose support, generosity, and dedication to preserving her grandfather's legacy have been truly invaluable. This exhibition and evenings like tonight would not be possible without her contributions and care. This evening, we're honored to explore Clarke's story and impact with an outstanding panel of experts. Dr. Larry Lynn Peterson, via Zoom, Kirby Lambert, and sculptor Lauren Pinsky. Each of our speakers will share their insights for about 15 minutes, followed by a Q&A session where you'll have a chance to ask your questions and join in on the conversation. After the discussion, if you haven't visited our exhibition Speechless, we invite you to explore it, enjoying Clarke's work up close and reflecting on the remarkable life of the man who talks not. Thank you for joining us tonight, and please help me welcome our first panelist, Dr. Larry Lynn Peterson.
Thank you, Sarah. Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me?
We can. I think we're going to make the volume a little bit louder.
All righty.
Now you're good.
Well, it's nice to see you all here. I'm actually in the vault next door. Dave Solberg from Scobie, Montana. You've probably never heard of Scobie. It's a suburb of Plentywood. I know Les Marsh, I think, just texted me and told me he's there to represent Plentywood. But Dave called me or texted me a couple days ago and said he's bringing a bag of rotten tomatoes to throw. So I decided, Dwayne decided I'd be safe in the vault. And so we have an AI-generated bookcase behind me. But one of the problems is when I show the slides, I'm not going to be able to see the slides. I've got them in front of me here, and I'm going to have to ask Sarah to advance the images. So hopefully we can keep them synced. This is every time a talk is given, there's always challenges. So it's certainly true that a picture is worth 1,000 words, but rarely are 1,000 words worth a picture. So what I'm going to present to you is about 30 pictures that I hope will encapsulate the life of this remarkable artist. Sarah, let's start with the first image, please. And let me know when it's up.
You're good.
All righty. Well, in 2019, the Clarke book came out, and I gave a talk at the Russell Museum. I had about 130 images. Tonight, we're going to see about 30, so I've condensed it down. And I'd like to thank Dana again for all of her help putting this book together. Lauren was a big help. Jim Combs, Kirby, of course, I dedicated this book to Kirby, my favorite historian, and you're very fortunate to have him there tonight, actually my favorite author too. And then Dwayne, all the images in this incredible book that are from the Russell Museum were photographed by Dwayne, has many artistic talents. So let's go to the next slide, Sarah. So on the left is John Clarke. This is 1966. And imagine for a minute, I want you all to try to imagine being what his life has been like. He's born in 1881, a year after Russell arrives in Montana Territory. He's born in Highwood, which I think is about 30 miles east of Great Falls, to Horace Clarke, who is half Scottish and half Blackfeet, and his mother is full Blackfeet, Margaret First Kill. He grew up in an era before there was any electricity, no films, radios, and he lived to see the men land on the moon in 1969. He died in 1970. I mean, will there ever be a life in this country that it will span that sort of developments in our country's history? I really think his story is the most compelling of any Western American artist. And I wrote a book a couple years ago called The American West Reimagined, where I profiled 125 artists. There's no one that had the life of John Clarke. He also, at age 2, lost his hearing probably from scarlet fever. Horace had 8 children, only 3 of them made it to adulthood. And as you all know anything about history in that era, there was a lot of children that died at an early age. A lot of women died during childbirth. And it was a hard scrabble life in growing up. Horace homesteaded in 1875 in Highwood, and eventually moved in 1889 to Midvale, which is now East Glacier Park, and that's where his studio eventually was. Now, if you haven't seen the book, you may not know who that fellow is on the right, and that's Joe DeYoung, Charlie's only protege. And this is at his home in 1966 in Hollywood. Joe DeYoung had a 12-year relationship with Russell, but Clarke and DeYoung had almost 50 years. They were close friends. Joe DeYoung was also deaf, so they related with sign language, but remained dear friends to the end. All right, Sarah, let's go to the next image. And this is Joe DeYoung and Charlie. Probably most of you think of Joe DeYoung as a young man, and they're signing in Bullhead Lodge in 1916. Often they would stop by Clarke's studio in Midvale, as it was called back then, before they went on to Bullhead Lodge. Next slide, please. So the great Malcolm Clarke, this was John's grandfather. Malcolm is one of the most famous Montanans in his generation. He was born in 1817 and died in 1869. He was a famed fur trader up in Fort Benton. He was one of the 12 founders of the Montana Historical Society. He was Scottish, but married a Blackfeet Kokona, who was Horace's, John's father's father. His probably most noted claim to fame, though, was what was called the Baker's Massacre. In 1869, he was murdered by one of his wife's cousins, and the murderers fled up to the Marias, and Baker and his military men went up to the Marias, and they were told this camp didn't include the culprits, but they attacked and killed several hundred Blackfeet. Almost all were old men, old women, children, and a lot of them had smallpox and were dying of disease. So it was quite a tragedy book. The Red and White book and Blood on the Marias were two of the books that document that terrible tragedy. So John Clarke had a very famous grandfather. Next slide, please. So in 1889, Horace takes his family up to Midvale. He and the Dawsons really founded the area. And this is the homestead house where John lived as a youth. It unfortunately burned down in 1962, but you can see Glacier Park behind there. It's a beautiful spot. Next slide, please. And so this is John Clarke as a young man carving there. And he must have carved thousands of sculptures. He was just an incredible sculptor, especially of animals. Next slide, please. So Clarke, when he was 13, went to school at the North Dakota School of the Deaf from 1894 to 1897. And they mainly taught the deaf there printing and dairy farming. It was in Devil's Lake, North Dakota. Then in 1898, he went to the Montana Deaf and Dumb Asylum. And a lot of people today are offended by the word dumb, but dumb centuries ago meant silent or mute. And so I don't think we can want to be too critical on the folks that named that institution. He eventually, and that was in Boulder, and that's where he first learned to carve and fell in love with carving. He later, in 1900, moved to St. John's School for the Deaf in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He was there for about 4 years. And then he worked in Milwaukee until 1910, until Glacier Park was developed. And then he came back home to Midvale and then opened his first gallery in 1913. Next slide, please. So here is John up hunting, unlike Charlie, who would go on hunts but never hunted. Clarke enjoyed hunting, but they not only enjoyed hunting, but they actually needed it for food because they were almost having a starvation existence. But he got to know his animals that he carved intimately in these hunting trips. Next slide, please. Here he is at Two Medicine after another successful hunt. And later on, all his hunting experience. Next slide, please. His hunting experiences allowed him to do these incredible large carvings that perhaps some of you have never seen. A lot of us have seen the smaller carvings. So this was his first gallery. It was in Midvale, right on Highway 2. And he rapidly became famous for his carvings. It was fortuitous that Glacier Park and Glacier Park Lodge was right there. So people would get off the train and stay there. And the gallery was just right next to the lodge. And it still is, where Dana has her fabulous gallery. Next slide, please. Many of you may remember when you were growing up having documentaries at school by Pathé. Well, this is Pathé actually filming John Clarke carving the Trapper, which is down at the Museum of the Americas in Polson. This is in front of Tom Dawson's home. The Dawsons and the Clarkes were kind of the founding fathers of Midvale. Next slide, please. So as we progress through his life, on May 6, 1918 in Whitefish, he marries Mary Simon, who was nicknamed Mamie, just like Nancy was nicknamed. Nancy Russell was named Mamie. And she had been divorced. She was a camp cook. And you can imagine the status of a divorced woman was about the same status as a Blackfeet at that time. So it's amazing where they started from and where they ended up. She was 2 years older than John, and of course that was another little stigma. So let's go to the next slide. John participated in a number of deaf conventions around the country. This one was from Spokane, and I think this is my favorite image of him, kind of in his prime in the early 1920s. Next slide, please. And this is Mamie. Kind of like Nancy Russell, she was the business manager. Obviously, she did the speaking because John couldn't. In that period, there were two forms of communicating. Some people, like Alexander Graham Bell, wanted the deaf to learn oral sign language. And then there was the camp of using the hands for sign language. And John used the Indian hand sign language. Next slide, please. This is, I believe in the exhibit, this is fighting buffaloes made out of cottonwood. He made two of these. One's at the Russell Museum. This was right around 1923. And there was another one made that he sold to John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller had his own Pullman car, and he had his 5 kids. Nelson Rockefeller was one of them. And he pulled up to Midvale and purchased 5 sculptures, all of which are in the book. And there was one other made that's at the Russell Museum. Next slide, please. So a lot of you may think that he just used a chisel and a hammer, but he also used electric drill. He was on the edge of technology. And here he is using his drill to finish some of the fine points on this wood sculpture. Next slide, please. This is his next studio that was on Highway 49, and I believe it's right where the current gallery is that Dana runs. And you can imagine the children around there, how fascinating it must have been to go up and see all these different animals, some of them almost life-size. Next slide, please. So here, John and Mamie, they're using sign language, and she may be commenting what a great job he's doing. But a very loving couple, very close. Next slide. But they lacked a child, kind of like Charlie and Nancy, and so they went to Helena and adopted a 2-year-old girl named Joyce Marie. And Joyce Turvey is Dana's mom, and Joyce ran the gallery, and many of you probably know her and have been to the gallery when she was living. Joyce and Dana are the greatest spokesmen for Clarke. Seems like all artists need to have spokesmen after they're gone to keep their legend going. But he loved Joyce. Imagine being a little child growing up in that environment. It'd be like being at Disneyland. Next image, please. Here's Joyce with Mr. Goat. Next image, please. In 1941, a few months before World War II started, John came to Great Falls and gave some free classes. Great Falls Tribune had ran a number of articles on John over the years. Next slide, please. Now, many of you that have Clarke little bears probably have seen other people, and the bears look almost identical. I'm kind of amazed he allowed this to be printed in the Great Falls Tribune, but there he is at on the cutting edge of technology with a duplicator. So if you think a lot of his bears look alike, they are because he used a duplicator, which I didn't know that until I saw this image that Kirk and Doug Nelson provided me. Next image, please. John had a deep love for his heritage, his Blackfeet heritage. And this is a bust of Two Guns White Calf, the famous Blackfeet, probably the most famous in John's generation, was a spokesman for the Blackfeet all around the country. Feinhold Rice did several paintings of Two Guns White Calf that ended up on calendars and prints for the Great Northern Railway. Next image, please. Here's just another image. He had a number of photographs in the book where he's in his head bonnet and Blackfeet clothing. Next image, please. So here is his masterpiece called Blackfeet Encampment. And he actually did a lot of this work right in the lobby of the Montana Historical Society. When I first met Kirby Lambert a few decades ago, Jim Combs and I went down there, and Kirby was just wonderful. You know, he didn't know who we were, and he gave a tour all over the Historical Society, down in the vaults, and then this is right still in the lobby over the archives and library entrance. And it was amazing to me. Kirby said that he actually helped Clarke carve this, and he was the lead Indian with the headdress on there. So you'll have to ask Kirby about that. I'm sure he'll want to talk about that. Next slide, please. So I just thought I'd throw in a couple images of all the work he did, the different sizes here, from human busts to small animals to the larger animals on the right. Incredibly talented. Next slide, please. Some of his sculptures he hand painted. Most of them were made out of cottonwood, but he used other more exotic woods at times, but cottonwood was quite available in that area. Next slide, please. Here he is at a show in Great Falls, and I think if you go through the show after this, you'll get to see the finished product. Kind of reminds me of a Hika pack train, which perhaps Clarke was inspired by. He was inspired by Russell, Philip R. Goodwin for some of his trapping scenes, and this is just a beautiful example of his work. Next slide, please. Here's the hunter and buffalo, which you'll get to see, I think, in the show. Another amazing sculpture, probably inspired by Russell's 1903-04 buffalo hunt that eventually was made into a bronze. Next slide, please. So in the end, this is in the 1960s, Clarke is out fishing, and it reminds me of a river runs through it. And as Norman MacLean said, eventually all things merge into one, and a river runs through it. And some of the rocks are the rocks of time, and under those rocks are words. And some of the words are the people he loved but never understood, but he still reached out to them. And in some cases, one word, like a loved one who is no longer here, can be worth 1,000 pictures. A rare case when that's true. Clarke died in 1970. 1969 was kind of the end of the Western era. John Wayne gets his Academy Award for True Grit. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid are the last Western to be the highest grossing box office hit as a Western. Midnight Cowboy won for Best Picture, but it really had nothing to do with cowboys. And John Wayne finally won an Oscar for True Grit. One of the tragedies in the 60s was the breakup of the Beatles, but also in 69, the bin landed on the moon. So from a time where he started, where the West was only lit by fire, to the point where someone landed on the moon, that's quite a ride. And this man is a legend, and his story is just incomparable. So thank you.
Our next speaker, Lauren Pinsky.
Hi. I grew up in Great Falls, just up the street, 4th Avenue North, went to East Junior High, Great Falls High, and I remember as a kid riding a bicycle down here and just kind of wandering around. The museum wasn't nearly the way it is now, and to me this museum is really one of the crown jewels of Great Falls, and so I'm honored to be here, and thank you. And Larry, when he was writing his book, asked me to write a quote. And I was shocked that he actually included it in his book, but this is what I wrote, and it's kind of the substance of what I want to talk about tonight. John Clarke was able to do what most carvers and artists only dream of doing. He was able to capture the personalities of his subjects, his mountain goats. Mountain goats are simply arrogant. They're gorgeous and they know it, and Clarke captured every ounce of that pride and arrogance. Bighorn sheep are like Cary Grant, pure class, and Clarke's sheep are proud, elegant, and classy. His bears reveal their indifference, their insatiable curiosity, their humor, and their anger mixed with terror over being caught in a trap. He knew his subject, and he knew how to express them in wood, and he was and is one of the greatest. Let's see if I can push the right button. Being deaf, and they say that when you lose one of your senses, your other senses become heightened and intensified. So being deaf, what that must have done to his eyesight. I've hiked a lot in Glacier Park, and usually I do what you're not supposed to do and hike alone, and I know how much hearing means to me, just simply, hearing a twig break or a bird take off or something like that, and how much he relied upon his eyesight, not only to keep him safe, but to observe what he was carving and what he was painting. To see not only the details, but how an animal moves, how an animal reacts to different things, and how an animal expresses himself. I've done a lot of repair work on different carvings, and this is one of the carvings that I repaired. Had a broken wing and a couple other minor things. And when I was working on this, well, when you're repairing a carving, you spend a lot of time staring at it. And you're trying to understand the grain pattern, you understand how this part fits here, how he painted it, even what he used to paint it, and if it's even painted. And you begin to take a look at his focal points. And I remember for a long time with this carving, feeling like the focal point was the big goat protecting the baby. But then after a while, it kind of transferred to the eagle, and the expression on the eagle's face of one of terror. And the head is kind of misshapen. I was a bird carver for a long time, and I carved a mess of eagles. And I kind of began to feel like, well, maybe he took a little artistic license and just kind of flattened the head back a little bit, brought the feathers out. Yeah, maybe a little artistic license. And I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, sitting at home, nothing good on TV, you're going through YouTube videos, and I saw a YouTube video of an eagle and a wolf fighting over a rabbit. And there it was. The head, the eagle had brought his feathers out, to make his head look larger and more terrifying. Kind of like, you see some of the lizards that do that. I never knew an eagle could do that. I never saw that in an eagle, but John did. He saw that, and he carved it that way. The goat pictures. I don't know where I get this picture someplace, but I mean, come on. How arrogant and proud and gorgeous that is. you know. Another one, you know, turned staring at you. This animal knows how beautiful he is. He's classy, he's gorgeous, and that's the kind of thing that John carved. Oop, go back one, okay. It is said that one person said that his mountain goats were anatomically perfect. And he could carve something like that because he spent time in the mountains of Glacier National Park. And he went up on the cliffs and he saw them. Another one, the goat carving here. You know, just gorgeous. And he said, there's one quote, anatomically perfect. The sheep, and take a look at the bighorn sheep next to the goat. If you've seen any old Cary Grant movies, you know, whether it's To Catch a Thief, Charade, Arsenic and Old Lace, I mean, he's just classic. He's classy, elegant, the way he portrays himself, the way he relates to other people. That's how his sheep are carved. You know, look at this. I took this in the parking lot of Many Glacier, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. How much did the Park Service pay this thing to stand like that? I mean, really. I mean, it's just gorgeous. Kind of reminds me of Cary Grant, I guess. I don't know. And this is one of his carvings. Same type of thing. You know, he carved it just simply to be classy and elegant. And when this is over, go walk around and take a look at the carvings of the sheep. That's how he carved them. They're all like that. High head, strong-willed. Yeah, that's how he carved them. And it's because that's what he saw. He took the time to go out and observe them. That's what he saw. The bears, he did lots of bears. And remember, this is a time, you know, when he was here, he didn't have drones out taking pictures. He didn't have trail cams taking pictures. He didn't have telephoto lens that you could take a picture of something, you know, a mile away. Lots of areas in the park, very few people wandered around. Who would ever think of carving a bear and 2 cubs nursing? The only person who would think of that is someone who saw it, who was out there and witnessed that. How about a bear leaning up against a tree, scratching itself, but also spreading its scent to let the other bears know that, hey, I'm pretty big because my scent is way up here and yours is way down here. So, you know, be careful when you're around here. And so he carved what he saw, and that's part of the beauty of what Clarke has done. Again, who would ever, this is like a bear sitting there contemplating the world or something, who knows what. But he saw that, and that's part of the beauty. He was out there and he saw those things. This one here, yeah, okay. The first thing I thought of is, okay, a bear's got a bottle, but I remember growing up in Great Falls, and we would go to Glacier Park several times a year. I often thought it was amazing that we always spent the night in East Glacier, but I have no idea why we never stopped at the Clarke Gallery just down the street, because this was in the late 50s, early 60s. But it was also the time when, you know, and we have a picture. You used to go up, you know, say going to the Sun or to Medicine or something like that, and bears would come out and you'd roll the window down a little bit and maybe throw half a sandwich out there. Or maybe you'd throw an orange out there. If you really wanted to see the bears, you go to the dumps at night because that's where they were at. And so to see a bear holding a bottle, yeah, he probably saw that. And that's probably why he carved it. Sure, it takes a sense of humor to do that, but he probably saw it. And that's the kind of personalities that he was able to put into his carvings. And also back then, people trapped bears. And they were killing grizzly bears back then. And so a bear like this in a trap, he probably saw that. Maybe he even trapped one of them. I don't know. But I'm sure he saw that being an outfitter in the early part of the 20th century. Yeah, he saw that. And the expression on the bear's face, the anger, the terror, the frustration, he was able to express that. I have a little carved bear, I don't know, maybe it was one of the made into the duplicators. And I was walking around and saw several other ones out there. And it's really funny because he has kind of this leg that kind of goes back. You know, why? Now, you know, I just saw it and it's like, oh, why? It's no big deal. But last year I was up at East Glacier and got up real early to go over to going to the Sun Highway. You should go over to the east side. It's open for anyone. And this was about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And there's a little cub grizzly bear, you know, prancing down the street, down the middle of the road, just about at 2 Dog Flats. And there that leg was sticking out, prancing along that one leg. I thought it was just, yeah, maybe that's just how the wood was. No, that's what he saw. He carved what he saw. This little cub bear with its wonky leg kind of sticking out, and that's what he carved. And to me, that's how he was able to be so great. He knew his subject, and he also had the artistic technique and skills to capture their form and personalities. He was really, really good. Really good. Thank you.
And our next speaker, Kirby Lambert.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I would like to compliment and commend Sarah and the entire crew here at the Russell on their Clarke exhibit. It's wonderful. Thank them for letting me be part of this very distinguished panel. I told Sarah when she first talked to me, I was like, well, you don't need me. You have Larry. Larry can answer every question you have. But I'm very thankful she didn't listen to me, and I'm honored to be part of it. So I'm going to tell a slightly different story that I don't think is as well known about as some of these things about Clarke. And this is a Blackfeet encampment, and it's Clarke's largest work. And for the past 4 years, this is what it looked like. Hanging in the lobby of the Montana Historical Society in Helena, it's been covered to protect it from construction dust as the society underwent a tremendous expansion and remodeling. Given its size and weight, curators determined it was safer to leave it in place, well covered and out of harm's way, than it was to move it twice as part of the construction process. But that wasn't always the case. For a slab of cut wood that's 13 feet wide and 4 feet high and weighs an estimated 1,500 pounds, it has actually traveled quite a bit on a journey that lasted almost 40 years from the time it was commissioned until it was finally installed in the Historical Society. So the Montana Historical Society, or MHS, was founded in 1865 in Virginia City. And during its first century, it had a variety of homes, including the Montana State Capitol. It was during its capital years that the Society received its first Clarke into its collection, and that was this mountain goat, which was given by John's father, Horace. When the Society moved into its first purpose-built home across the street from the Capitol, 30 years later, that was still the only Clarke we had in our collection, but that wouldn't be the case for long. And I refer to the Historical Society as we. I should be clear here, I'm retired. I no longer speak for the Historical Society. I just still identify strongly with it. So although Clarke is best known for his three-dimensional sculptures, he also did a small number of large-scale two-dimensional friezes. About 1940, he produced 3 panels for the Browning Community Hospital, and in 1941, he did these 2 panels for the Museum of the Plains Indian, which is also in Browning. The museum panels are carved from Philippine mahogany and measure 3 feet by 5 feet each, and they still hang over the entryway to the museum. In 1943, Clarke carved this frieze for the library at Conrad High School. It's also carved from Philippine mahogany and measures 2.5 feet by 4 feet wide and is 3 inches thick. It was commissioned in memory of H.P. Lewis, who served as superintendent of the Conrad schools for many years, and was also a good friend of Clarke's as well. And she may not want me to tell you this, but I had a most delightful tour getting to see this mural firsthand with Janice Farkell this morning, who's the historian for Conrad. And I'm not going to say, if you want to go see it, call Janice, but if I were you, that's what I would do. I don't know how much time she wants to spend showing off this mural, but it's really wonderful. They've done a fantastic job of preserving it and displaying it. So I do encourage you to see it if you get the chance.
You may call me.
Okay.
What's the number?
So in 1953, Mabel Bjork, who was a Helena artist and a member of the Montana Institute for the Arts, had this idea that the society should acquire one of these friezes for its new building. So she and her husband Ray instigated a campaign and to see that the state acquired what she called, quote, a presentation piece of Clarke's. So as a result, Society Director K. Ross Toole secured $2,000 in state funds and commissioned Clarke to produce a frieze for the new building's main lobby. When Clarke failed to show up and start work by August of 1954, Toole obtained permission from the state to spend the allocated money on other museum projects. Then, in 1956, Clarke showed up unexpectedly. A slab of cottonwood that measured approximately 13 feet long, 8 feet high, and 8 inches thick at its deepest was waiting for him in storage. It had been supplied by the Anaconda Company, which had originally intended to sell it to the Society for $500. Now, however, the Society wrote the company stating, "Mr. Clarke has just turned up to begin work. The fact that he is 2 years overdue means little to him. To us, it simply means that the money that was set aside for the project is now gone." So the letter goes on to state, or to list some of the out-of-state collectors and some of his major works, but then it adds, "One must search to find examples of his work in Montana, so we feel that it is fitting that we have one here and get it while the gentleman is still able to produce at his extremely high artistic level." Toole's bottom line in sending this letter was to ask the company to donate the wood, which they did. And then Clarke set to work on the mural, as Larry indicated, right there in the Society lobby. And here, Clarke poses with the almost finished panel. I'm not sure how long exactly it took him to complete the frieze, but it seemingly was done within a couple of months, which I think is amazing. The Society did eventually find the $2,000 it promised to pay him, but it took until 1959 to make that final payment. Thank you. Clarke didn't let work on the frieze get in the way of important things like fishing. In a 1968 letter to MHS, a woman named Elizabeth Lewis wrote, "I visited your museum while John Clarke was making your wood carving. On asking to see him, I was told he had gone fishing. He had been gone a week or so, and they didn't know when he would be back." Clarke also loved to hunt, and his rifle offers an example of a bas-relief carving that's considerably smaller than a Blackfeet encampment. In reminiscing about Clarke, former MHS curator Bob Morgan recalled that at some point, Director Toole wrote Clarke a rather lengthy letter asking when the frieze might be finished. In response, Clarke sent a simple postcard showing rugged glacier peaks with an elk on the left peak and on the far right, John in his Jeep heading towards the elk. as Morgan concludes, simple, blunt, and to the point, and most certainly a monument to John's sense of humor. But finish the frieze he did, and here's a closer look. So this is the left detail, and there's just, always all kinds of wonderful detail in his carvings. This is what the middle looks like. And the right side. So it's now the autumn of 1956. Clarke has finished, and the society has this wonderful frieze. It's ready to install. One would have to assume that that's the end of the story, but it's not. Rather, the next thing we know, a Blackfeet encampment has been loaned to the University of Montana, and it's hanging in the field house. It's in 1960, in a response to a question from Michael Kennedy, who's now the Society's director, Rudy Audio responds, "The frieze is nicely installed in place and looks well in its surroundings. I'm glad the university has been able to display it." This, of course, begs the question, why wasn't a Blackfeet encampment installed in Helena? Well, stay tuned. I may or may not have the answer. Although the field house might not have been the ideal location for the frieze, it still attracted lots of attention there. This included the attention of the Montana Association of the Deaf, which went by MAD, and the Montana School for the Deaf and Blind. In May 1960, Mervyn Garrettson, a teacher from the school, contacted MHS offering to make a plaque commemorating Clarke to be placed on the frieze. Subsequently, in 1964, during its state convention, which was held that year in Missoula, MAD held a ceremony to to dedicate the plaque. Clarke was in attendance. And I haven't found any record at this point that anyone is upset at this point that the frieze is being housed or being exhibited in the field house, but that changes. At their 1979 convention, Glenn Preston made a mandate that MAD take action in requesting that the frieze be transferred back to MHS. 2 years later, that mandate had changed further, and now MAD wanted the frieze to come to the school in Great Falls. In 1982, the president of MAD wrote the society requesting the transfer of a Blackfeet encampment from the field house to the school. The society's board declined to make a permanent gift of the frieze, but did agree to loan it to the school for an indefinite period. The spring issue of the MAD newsletter celebrated the installation of the carved panel. As the high school senior Jenny Yost noted, "I think that it is a great privilege for students and staff to have the frieze here, as it is in the right place. I feel that something big and good is going to come out of having the frieze. I'd like to thank the MAD for doing so much and putting their time into bringing it here." So by this point, there's an undercurrent of tension between MAD and MHS. And as you can see in this school newsletter celebrating the installation of the frieze, the Association for the Deaf is credited as being, quote, the presenter of the frieze, but no place does it mention the society anywhere. Then, in 1993, MHS finally mounted a major retrospective of Clarke's work. This was an exhibit that we'd been seriously anticipating for more than a decade, and we felt that it was important to install a Blackfeet encampment as part of the exhibit and then keep it there in Helena permanently. Understandably, the school was not happy to see it go. Ultimately, they petitioned the society's board and asked the governor's office to force its return to Great Falls. School administrators maintained that the frieze held greater value there as an inspiration for deaf students. In response, Society Director Brian Cockhill wrote, "The installation of the Clarke frieze fulfills a 40-year goal. This is in no way intended to slight the concerns of the school. It's our opinion, however, that to exhibit Clarke's largest and most significant work to the maximum number of people, it must remain on exhibit in the society galleries. Clarke is important because he overcame a handicap, but also because he is one of the most talented Native American artists to work in the 20th century." The Society's responsibility is to make sure that the work excuse me, is accessible for all people to enjoy. And personally, I would agree with what Clarke said, except that I would amend his statements to delete the words Native American, because I think Clarke was one of the most talented artists working in Montana, indigenous or otherwise. The Society did make overtures to help alleviate the situation with the school at least a little bit. We brought deaf students from Great Falls down to Helena to participate in exhibit programming. We offered to give them a life-size photo reproduction of the frieze, and then we offered to give them the large-scale photographs that had been blown up and used in the exhibit when it came down. If running afoul of the school for the deaf and blind was not exactly a pleasant experience for us, one of the best parts about being involved in this exhibit was getting to work closely with and getting to know Joyce Clarke Turvey, and Larry showed you this photo as well. But she did so much to help preserve and promote Clarke's legacy. She was a lovely lady who was immensely helpful to us in putting together our exhibit and in all other things Clarke related. So I'm ready to wrap this up, but the burning question still remains: why wasn't the frieze installed at MHS in 1956? The only official explanation we have is a 1960 letter in which Michael Kennedy cryptically states, "When the massive wood carving by John L. Clarke was completed, circumstances prevented it from being properly utilized in this building." Well, what exactly does that mean? What were those circumstances? I can't tell you with 100% certainty, but I have a theory. I don't know, okay. So on the right side, you see that blank white space that's formed by the mezzanine on the second floor. It appears to be the perfect spot to hang the frieze. It looks like a Blackfeet encampment was just made to go there, except that it might have been made to go there, but it wasn't the perfect spot. In making plans to mount the frieze back in our lobby when we brought it back from Great Falls in 1993, our exhibit designer did the measuring, and it turns out it doesn't fit. It's just a few inches too long to fit in that space. So I believe that that was the intended spot all along, and when in the 1956 they got ready to hang it and did the measuring and realized that it wasn't going to fit where they thought it should go, they just didn't hang it. So after being closed for the past 4 years, a new and dramatically altered MHS will open next month. By all means, come and see it. It's going to be amazing. There will be so many new features, but also a large number of old friends like Charlie Russell's paintings and Clarke's masterpiece, which, although it didn't move, will now be hanging over the entrance to the new Larry Lynn and Leanne Peterson Library and Archives. So although this time the frieze stayed in place, during the construction, the space beneath it has been dramatically repurposed and transformed. Thank you.
All right, we're going to start our Q&A section, but I do want to say if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you. This is the only way Larry will be able to hear your question. I'll hand that one to you guys too. Okay, do we have any questions?
Sarah, I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question, and I think maybe Lauren is the one who can answer it. To me, it seems like, Clarke is known for his three-dimensional sculptures, and they're amazing, and I think these two-dimensional sculptures are equally amazing in a different way. Which would actually be harder to carve, something three-dimensional or something two-dimensional?
I think the three-dimensional is harder, but most of the time a two-dimensional, you're telling a story, and you need to somehow include that story in the carving. You know, the three-dimensional bears, yeah, the bear's sitting there on a stump or something, but the encampment, that's a whole story of a people. And to be able to include that whole type of thing, I think it'd be very difficult. I've played with that many times, and I don't feel comfortable with the work. The thing I find is interesting, Clarke also taught other people to carve. And one of the other carvers was a gentleman by the name of Albert Racine. And that's the kind of stuff that he primarily carved, was the two-dimensional, and they were stories like that. And he did a bunch of carvings in the Methodist Church in Browning, same type of thing. And you kind of wonder how much he learned from Clarke to be able to tell a story in wood with carvings.
Thank you. I certainly couldn't do either one, so they'd all be hard to me.
Thank you. Hi, Larry. It's Dave Solberg. I got a bucket of tomatoes out in my pickup, but I forgot to bring them in. I just have a question because I know that a lot of artists didn't keep an accurate inventory of what they did, and I'm wondering if Clarke did, or if there's been an inventory somehow compiled since.
I don't know if Clarke did an inventory. I know that Joyce and Dana have been compiling names, and they have between the two of them, they've developed a pretty good list of where the carvings are at and who owns them and who's looking for carvings and these types of things. But I have never heard of a composite list of what John has done and that he's put together. It's nice that he's put his name on almost all of them. Occasionally one pops up that his name isn't on it, and you really have to then start comparing carving techniques to be able to try and authenticate it. But it's very few times that he does that.
Yeah, Larry's book that he showed you the picture is certainly the best thing that's ever been published, most comprehensive thing that's been published on Clarke, if you're looking for something published.
And I would add that so many of his works were very small. They were sold in the shops at the lodge there and went for a few pennies, 25 cents, 50 cents, $1. So they were, and he cranked them out. And so I don't think he really at that point thought they were works of art, more kind of like trinkets for the tourists. So I don't know of any inventory he would have kept.
And a lot of the small ones are made out of cottonwood bark, which is actually fairly easy to carve, but is very, very brittle. I mean, just simply a wrong slip of the knife and it pops off, and they're not, it doesn't look like they're varnished. And so lots of times there will be cracks and splits, and a jaw will fall off or an ear will be broken off because they're so delicate.
So I didn't realize till the exhibit came to the museum here, he also did some paintings. Did he market any of his paintings? I mean, we all know he's a wood carver, but I didn't realize that he actually painted also.
Yeah, he's done paintings, watercolor, pen and ink, a wide variety of things. Dana has reproduced quite a few pieces, that she sells at the gallery and online. But most of what he did was wood carving. But yeah, he did flat work also.
He also did illustrated letters, and the Society has a wonderful collection of letters that he wrote to his friends Peanut, he called Mr. Duke, Peanut and Vera Duke. And most of them are about fishing or hunting. And they're just really wonderful little glimpses into Clarke the person. And a few of them are in the exhibit here.
Hi, I'm Janice Farkell. And what's the difference between, I don't even know how to say it right, the bas relief and the frieze? Those are terms that, I mean, I know them when I see them, but I don't know the technical part.
The bas relief and the other word? A frieze? A frieze, and I wouldn't swear that I'm necessarily using the terminology correctly. I often call it a mural, and technically, I think it's a frieze. Bas relief is just a kind of carving that's two-dimensional, basically. Rather, I mean, it does have 3 dimensions because there's depth there, but it's a shallow carving as opposed to being actually a 3-dimensional kind of a standalone sculpture. And the bas relief, a lot of times they're like bronze is a pretty common medium for bas relief, but all kinds of material can be used. Sarah might have more to add to that than.
I think you did it pretty well. I will also add to, I asked for the mural to come to from MHS to us, and they told me no. So.
Hello, I'm Jack Gladstone, and my father, Wally Gladstone, was born in 1925. As a child growing up, before he went off to both boarding school and Haskell, that was good. That was a good move. Haskell boarding school. John Clarke would take time. I'm not sure if it was every year, but my dad went to school initially in Babb, and then in Browning and in East Glacier. And John Clarke would mentor the kids for that. You know, understanding that we have seed corn we have to distribute in our lifetime, and condition our kids, our youth, so they can grow up and replicate and innovate beyond what we were doing. And that's one of the things that I captured from my dad. Dad went off and got behind a 20mm anti-aircraft gun in World War II, and that was that. But he always maintained a certain line of stories, and he turned into a Boilermaker. And all the crafts, you know, and the blueprint and the vision. When time respects the careful hand, when chosen colors are dry, the vision forever stands. And there's this, I do my work up in Glacier, and I know Joyce Turvey there, and this resonates.
I'd just like to say, thank Jack. He helped me a lot with the book and taught me the difference between Blackfeet and Blackfoot, and I've got him quoted in the book too. So thank you, Jack.
So Jack mentioned his dad's service in World War II. The letters I mentioned to Peanut Duke, a lot of the illustrations written, or on the letters written in the early 40s, half of the illustrations are Clarke hunting in Glacier Park, and the other half of the illustrations are like bombings and, soldiers in Europe in World War II, which is a really interesting juxtaposition.
Some of those are in the book too, his watercolors and a number of his illustrated letters.
Hi there. Getting to talk with Dana, she told us that John was commissioned to make a lot of the light or the lamps for like the lodges up in the park. And through those conversations, she told us that when the lodges were remodeled or whatever, the lamps kind of just disappeared. Does anybody know what happened with those? I would imagine if there was one in every single room, there would be tons out there, but there aren't much. I mean, you can see a couple in the in the exhibition here, but I would imagine they would be all over the place. But does anybody know?
I have,
Oh,
I was just gonna say, I have two of them, which are both in the book. And one of them is of a Blackfeet, and actually the shade is painted. He painted the shade with a buffalo hunt and other scenes. And then another one I have is a bear, and it had a lampshade too of a whimsical bear scene. And I got them both on Craigslist from someone in Bozeman, which is pretty interesting. They're really neat. But they did, Louis Hill commissioned him to sell those lamps at the East Glacier Park Hotel. But I'm sure not many of it. I don't know if any of you have seen a lampshade that he's done, but I have, other than the one I have that I got on Craigslist, I've never seen the lampshade that came with the lamp.
Larry, we have one on display right now that's on loan
Oh, okay.
from somebody.
Great. Great.
Hello, I'm Colleen Gustafson from Browning, and I'm a Dawson descendant, and we have one of the bears. It doesn't have a shade with it, but it has the hole where the cord went through, and it came from my great-great-aunt, Flora Dawson, and they lived. Flora was my great-grandma's sister, and my great-grandma lived across the street from John and Mamie, and kind of grew up together. And we have a beautiful, two actually illustrated letters also.
Excuse me for not standing up. One of my feet fell asleep. So I don't want to stand up and fall. It'll take about 8 of you to lift me up. I live in Philadelphia, and in 1918, the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts gave John Clarke a gold medal, and I was wondering if any of you gentlemen know whether or not he ever visited my wonderful hometown, crime-free, beautiful city. But we did win the Super Bowl last year, 7 years ago, so we got that in our favor. So, like I said, I'm just curious if he ever came to visit Philadelphia at any time, because a number of his works were exhibited at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. Thank you.
That information's in the book. I would say, if from memory, I don't think he attended that, but I may be wrong. Kirby, do you have any recall on that?
I don't know. My impression from things that Joyce told me is that he really didn't particularly like to travel. He wanted to stay home on Glacier and did that as much as he could. But he certainly, when he was younger, I mean, he might have traveled more.
Any other questions?
I just would add one thing about, I don't think we talked much about Helen, his aunt and Horace's sister, but Helen was an amazing Clarke also, and she, along with one other lady, was the first elected public official in the state, first female elected public official, and she had quite a life and career too that's documented in the book in quite full detail, but I think we need to recognize her too. The family was just a very outstanding family from generation to generation.
All right, if we don't have any more questions, Larry can't hear you without the mic. Okay. Yes, the exhibition will be up through March. So it's not leaving anytime soon, and so we do welcome you guys, if you cannot stay tonight, to take a little peek. Come on back. It'll be up for a little bit longer. Thank you.
I've got one other thing I should add that I should give credit to is Jennifer Bottomley O'Looney at the Montana Historical Society. I think her new title is program manager. She's the one that inspired me to do the book. We had a Russell Symposium at the Historical Society in 2015, and she had an exhibit. I think it was mainly in the lobby, and I'd had one little Clarke that Jim Combs helped me get in Great Falls, little bear, but her exhibit really, I wasn't thinking of doing a book on him, and I thought, boy, he deserves a book. So hats off to Jennifer.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to bug Jennifer while she's still the head of the museum program, you better hurry because she's retiring at the end of this year. So she's excited about that.
My name is Sharon McGowan, but my mother was Harold and Lena Dawson's daughter, and they lived across the road forever and a day from John and Mamie Clarke. And I grew up in East Glacier with my grandparents and my family, and we spent hours with John and Mamie and Joyce. Is Joyce here tonight? Oh, down, I meant to say. Oh, and anyway, it's just wonderful to hear and know that someone that I knew, my grandmother could speak to him in sign language, both of my grandparents. One time when John was carving the piece at Helena, we went over to Helena, and I was probably in junior high, and we walked in the door, and there was this noise, and my grandmother turns around, and she goes, "John, John, oh my God, John, it's so good to see you." And he comes down the scaffold, and they start signing to each other. And being a junior high girl, of course, I was very sophisticated and very embarrassed. And I rue that day to this day, and that was 70 years ago or more.
Hmm.
All right, any other questions? No? All right, well then I would like to thank you all again for coming tonight to our Clarke After Dark. You're more welcome again to go and visit the exhibition. And thank you to our panelists for coming tonight. All right, thank you.